Okay, we're back. If you noticed, Remy, I did some repair work.
I see. I see. I like the flowers behind you. It's new.
Yes, yeah. That I didn't love the I love the picture that I had there, but it was like very spur of the moment, and I was like, okay. And then this picture is sitting on the floor next to the TV in another room, and it's like, you know what? It adds a lot of color.
It does.
If I actually dusted it off, it would be better. The yellow is very bright, so it does draw the eye better. And then on the other side, I don't know if it's still visible. Is the bookshelf still visible back there?
Yeah, I can see the
Oh,
bookshelf.
but there's a picture in the picture. I moved the picture over there, so it's not perfect. But I realize that this needs to have either a screen. The blurring effect that Riverside provides, I don't love because this is a selfish thing. It makes my ears look massive. I noticed that a couple of times. And in the editing of the episodes, it's also, I don't know, for some reason, it doesn't stay in every scene. So it's like weird.
Interesting. Interesting.
Anyway, that's my,
I got to take a page out of your book and put pictures right here, covering up all of the scratch marks on my wall right
yeah,
here. That's what I got to do.
something, just something,
Something.
poster, picture of the children, picture of the family, whatever. Or your degrees, whatever you want. Like
Sure.
I had on my rabbinic ordination up there, I took that down. This picture is much bigger, but as long as you don't look above the picture to see the giant hole in the wall, um, you're doing just fine. Okay, how was your morning so far?
My morning's been great. It's been productive, which is always nice.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay,
Yeah.
I had a terrible run this morning.
I'm sorry to hear that. That actually is such a good segue. I'm stealing your thunder here, but my good of the week is about bad runs. So you like hit the nail on the head
Okay,
there.
so I had a bad run this morning to help set you up better. I had a really bad run this morning. It was a short one, but I just felt every muscle creaking as I got out there, and the wind was. I wasn't expecting wind today, and there was like just a lot of wind. It was like I know I'm complaining for 2.5 minutes here at the beginning of the show, but it was really bad, and I was like, "What am I doing?" Like the only the silver lining thing of this is that I finished what I was supposed to do, but it was horrifyingly bad. So hopefully this goes better than that train wreck
I hope
this
so.
morning,
I hope
and
so.
that sets you off into
That sets me up. Okay. So my good of the week is about my two sons. I have three kids, two older boys and a younger girl. So this is about my two older sons who are both athletes. They both play a lot of sports. Their two sports right now at the moment that they're really into are basketball and running. They've both really gotten into running. And we've been talking a lot about feelings in our house recently because my boys they're very emotional kids and they love sports, but they take it to heart. They take everything to heart.
Mhm.
And the older of the boys, older one, he came back from a run last week or 2 weeks ago. He had a bad run, and he was like so distraught. He was like distraught. Like it was crazy how much this was weighing on him. He's setting goals for himself. I have a nephew. Their cousin is a really talented runner. He's a teenager in high school, going to run in college, and my nephew put them on a training plan, and he's trying to follow it. And he went out for a run, and it was a bad run. Couldn't finish the run, and he came back, and he was just so unbelievably disappointed. And this is a recurring theme with both my kids, whether it's basketball or running, just like that disappointment. And so we've been talking a lot about disappointment when it comes to this. And as a parent, I've put a lot of thought into this because on the one hand, it's okay to be disappointed. You set out a goal for yourself and you didn't hit it. And on the other hand, it's like, all right, but it's first of all, it's just a run. And second of all, like it's supposed to be fun, right? Like if you're putting so much pressure on yourself and you're just feeling it so much, then it's not enjoyable. And so we had a pretty long conversation. I had a long conversation with the two of them about this. We're thinking of problem solving. How do we get over this like hump of just feeling so emotionally drained when you don't hit one of your goals when it comes to running or playing basketball? And they came up with a really creative solution, which is based on the conversation, they want to give themselves time to stew. We've said it's okay for whatever that timer is. And one of them, like the younger of them, actually puts on his timer on his watch, whatever it is, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And you're allowed to be mad at yourself. You had a bad run this morning, your bones feel like they creak too much, like you're allowed to be mad about that. But when that timer goes off, then you sort of put it behind you and you think to yourself, okay, like what can I learn from this to make it a little bit better for me or easier for me tomorrow? Or to just say, like, tomorrow's another day. I'm going to get back on the horse tomorrow and try it again. And I really like the solutions that they came up with. And I think I like them so much because I know where they get this sort of mentality, this psychology from, that Apple really doesn't fall far from the tree. And I was thinking about it even in my work life, like when I set out a goal for something or when I want to do something and I just don't do it well. It doesn't come out well. I don't hit something. We have these, I don't call them failures, it's a strong word, but we don't hit our goals. Like, that's reality. And I like their idea so much. I sort of want to implement it in my own life, where my professional life, where I'm working on something and it doesn't come out right and I'm not hitting the goal that I set out for myself. So I'm allowed to be mad. You're allowed to be mad. And then at some point, whenever that timer goes off, I'm going to say, okay, I need to push past it, move forward, either work on it again or learn from it, write down some of my feelings from it, and then just move forward. But to have that balance of disappointment and then perseverance that sort of drives us forward. So I'm giving my good of the week this week to my two boys who have a lot to teach me. What can I say?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so curious to see how long it lasts until like they break out into like a fight and you're like, what happened to what we were talking about? And
Obviously.
that was last week. That was
Yeah,
last
no.
week.
Obviously, it's not like problem solved. Suddenly they are totally emotionally healthy people and I have nothing to worry about anymore. I know that's not exactly how it works.
Solution, but not solved, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. In that line, then I'm going to do slightly two here, good of the weeks, just because the bad run had a good ending. Was that it?
Well, let's hear it. That's
in the
good.
sense that I kept the run, the streak of runs. I had been off for like 3.5 weeks. I hadn't run at all, and then I picked up. I was cajoled and convinced by my wife last week that I needed to start again. I knew it, and she convinced me last Friday to go out for a bad run on Friday. So Friday's run was bad, but Sunday's run was good, and Tuesday's run was good, and today's run was bad. So, but the streak of runs, meaning getting in just sort of the reps of the runs consistently, is, I know, the bigger win than actually having good runs every single time. You want the good ones every time. So like the positive side of that is that, okay, I did it again, right? And so I kept the streak going. I didn't give up. I finished the loop I was supposed to do today, and I can go to tomorrow's run, which is a much longer run, and feel like, okay, I can do that one. And so that is the plus side of that. It also helps with something else, which was my other good of the week, which also was in the failing space. I was going to do a nonprofit, but I can save that for another time. I've been working, and this segues right into our topic of the week. I've been working on something called an AI caller, which is the idea that you can automate basically and build an AI that off of a trigger calls anyone, right? It can be for reservations at a hotel. It can be reservations at a restaurant. It can be for setting appointments. This is where I see it the most, is in inbound or outbound, for setting, meetings and potential leads and things like that. So I watched this whole video about, it was off of inbound leads and follow up to qualified leads. And I was like, okay, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I'm going to build an AI caller for nonprofits, the goal of which is to help organizations clean up their data, right? Instead, it used to be that organizations would send out emails saying, hey, well, it started with, right, you get a phone call from an organization asking you to update your information, right? And then at some point you got skeptical and thought, that's not real, right? And so you're giving away information, and then it changed. At some point it moved over to email, and they send an email from the system. This is the information we have. If it's not correct, please click here to update, right? I doubt that's successful at all. But the AI caller as a version of that, I thought was, oh, that's super interesting, because you can deploy it at any time. And it's basically asking you to cover 4 or 5 pieces of information. It takes 5 minutes, just 5 questions. It takes 1.5 minutes to complete, right? And I'm like, okay, this is a great idea. I'm going to build this for nonprofits. Everyone's going to use it. And I worked on it for much of the day on Tuesday, and I got nowhere, right? I had gotten the first couple of steps down. I was like, okay, this is it. This is the voice. This is the name of the person. Here's the script. I borrowed a script from somebody else who was doing it for outbound and just changed the terminology. And I was like, this is going to be great. And then I hit a snag after like 4 hours into it. And I'm like, this is not going to work. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here, right? And so like from a tech standpoint, I was way out over my skis, right? That's the term I've been using a lot about a lot of things because I feel like I'm floating over a lot of things at the moment that I don't have complete handle on. And this is one of them. But it was such a power lesson in the AI piece of the business. And for me, as a good of the week, it was a good reminder of stay in your lane, dude. You can learn a lot about a lot of these things and you can try and figure some of the parts out, but you're best off in some regard handing that off to the pro, somebody who really knows how to do it and knows the mistake that you kept making and can't figure out and get it past. So my good of the week this week, two things of failure: failing in the run today and failing at building my AI caller, but neither of those things is finished. So anyway.
I like that. I like that. The other term that I've been hearing a lot from someone I'm working with pretty closely on a project is he talks a lot about knowing enough to be dangerous, and that it's okay to go to the experts and it's okay to ask for help and it's okay to understand that you don't have expertise in this area, but you now, after spending half a day or 3/4 of a day on this, you now have enough knowledge to be dangerous, where if you turn to an expert, you're going to have the language to be able to ask whatever you want to ask. You know what you don't know, where you wouldn't have had that experience beforehand. And I really, I think, again, like for learning for me, my instinct often is to just, when I'm at the very beginning of a project, to turn to the expert and say, here, go do it. But it's much more, it's better for me personally, and it's better for the project itself if I do some learning ahead of time. So I'm a little bit more knowledgeable. I know enough to be dangerous to be able to turn to someone and ask a better question than I otherwise would have. So I don't think that's, I think you did. You can call it failure, but again, it's a strong word over here.
Right. I learned, right? That's always the term I use instead of fail. But yeah, I think that's a really solid additional point. Like, I'm much smarter in the conversation now. I'm meeting with somebody later today about similar related subject, and I am much more further down the line than I was the first time I spoke to that person about this subject and the possibilities. As opposed to saying, like, I want to start this business, you build it and I'll sell it, whatever. This is now like, okay, let's get in the weeds. I can appreciate the workflow. What are the pieces that need to go into this? You know, what's the tech that you're going to use to solve? Have you verified, because I tried this one and it didn't work. How do I know that this flow is going to go all the way through? Much smarter about it. And it's one of the things that I pat myself on the back for, is not being afraid to try to do these things and do them poorly and miserably. I'm just simply trying to get to one version of it. And, you know, then I can go beyond that. But it's, you know, and I would say, I thought about this a long time and I was like, you know, tinkering around, like, should I even try this? And then like, you know what? Okay, Tuesday, I didn't have any specific meeting set up. I'm gonna dive into this and try to give it a go. It was not, I didn't understand half of what I was trying to do initially, but as the day went on, I got a good sense of it. But even at the end of the day, I was frustrated that it didn't get there. But okay, I'm closing in, I think, on a good tool, actually. So, which leads us right into today's conversation, which is something we have dabbled in a little bit here. We've dipped a toe into the issue of AI in the nonprofit world. I know each of us in our own time, in our own work, have used some of the tools and the technology around it, and we have not dedicated an episode to it. I imagine that we will be dedicating many episodes or parts of many episodes going forward on the matter of the AIification, whatever, that's not a word, but of the nonprofit space. And I am not concerned that we're ever going to get to a day of Skynet where the AI is going to run the nonprofits and raise all the money and do all the, I don't feel like the way to say that is that nonprofits are the top of the list for the AIs to take over. I just don't think, like, I don't think if the Terminator is coming, he's looking for the Salvation Army or for Charity Water and saying, you're my target. I think they're safe. But
you don't know that the bots aren't extremely altruistic and benevolent. Maybe they just want to see a better world. Possibility.
Yes, but the movie version of that is a better world that has no people in it, right? You can
That's fair.
solve the problem of homelessness another way.
Like getting rid of the people.
It's a horrible thing to say out loud. That's why I didn't say it exactly there. But there is a, you know, like the bots, I don't think they have the morals, like, you know, the moral chops there, which is probably one of the issues. But anyway, it brings into focus a little bit, and that the AI caller thing does a little of that too, of the subject of where are we with AI in nonprofit space? Where are we going with it? We talked about it as a trend piece in our trends episode a while back, maybe a month ago, a little bit more than a month ago, sometime in January. And it deserves many conversations with many people. And the way I would look at it is this is the beginning of that long-term conversation on the subject between the two of us on that.
Yeah, and while I'm not particularly nervous about the Skynet and the bots taking over, what I am nervous about, I'll give our listeners a peek behind the curtain here. Is we're recording this on a Thursday. It's going to come out in about 4 days on Tuesday. I am nervous that this episode is could be obsolete by then, right? Because
Yes.
the advances that are happening here are so incredibly rapid that it's sort of astounding to watch it unfold in real time and try and keep up with it all. I've been trying to enjoy the ride a lot because it's really crazy and unparalleled in so many ways.
Yeah, on that, two things on that point. That's a good point. I actually was listening to Elon Musk on a podcast this week, and he marveled at the speed that these things are improving. And I always think if the guy who's sort of very much at the forefront of a lot of industries that really gets not just the business applications, but the science and the tech part of it is also surprised at the speed and the pace. And admittedly, he's also deeply concerned about some of it. That to me is okay, wow. That's a big thing for me. And I always think about it in the same way that, in the long term, that my kids think about the internet, right? So, we grew up, I'm a little older than you, but I didn't grow up so much earlier than you in the time and the space where there was no internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least not for public consumption. It might have
Right.
been a military tool, but it wasn't available until, the mid 90s. And so I think my kids wonder what was the world like when you didn't have ESPN, couldn't go online to check out a website, you didn't have social media, and you just didn't know anything. You just didn't know. You knew what the newspaper said. You watched the news. You listened to the radio, and that was it. And I feel like this is that for them on some level. And then for us, it's oh, this is happening again, right? But this is something that is all encompassing, changing everything.
Yeah, and I think the big difference between the internet or any of the other revolutions that have happened in our lifetime, whether it's cell phones to smartphones, I think there's any number of them that we say that change our lives. I don't think that anything has been adopted as quickly as this. Even when the internet came out, and even when it was in people's homes, it still wasn't in everybody's homes. Not everyone was using it, or people were using it for different things, and it was sort of relatively slow adoption. I think at the time it was probably a rapid adoption as well. But now that we have this, where it's in a matter of a year, this has just become ubiquitous. Everyone is using it in some form or another, and I think that adoption is the wildest part to me. I don't think it's being adopted in terms of all. I think people are continue to be surprised at how far-reaching the applications of this are. Meaning, we're constantly learning about new tools that'll do this and do that. That I didn't even think that AI could help me do this, but it suddenly is doing that. And I think we'll probably talk about some of those things over the course of the next half hour or so. But it's the adoption of this is just wild.
Yeah, I was having coffee with somebody the other day, is an educator, and we were just talking about in the classroom and, that the students are ahead of the teachers on tech. And I told him that, the teachers will say, don't use ChatGPT for this project. I have a tool that I use that checks to see that it's real versus ChatGPT. And the kids are like, well, we have a tool that, works against your tool, which then, which makes it human again, and good luck. And I said it flips the whole thing back to, you got to do everything in class. You got to do everything with pencils, right? Because otherwise you don't know if they're learning anything. They're going to use a tool that you've never heard of, because 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid is way ahead because this is natural for them. Whereas for the older person, it is unnatural. And so they have to now, the learning and the habituation and all the acculturation around it, and the negative spin or the habits that you have, which you now have to break because of, AI can do that faster, quicker, cheaper than you can. Kids don't have that problem, right? They're like, why not just do chat?
No, but I did see something funny that to show that the teachers are playing catch up as well. That that there's all these tools out there for students to help write their papers and whatnot, and to make it look like it wasn't written by ChatGPT or some AI. Yeah. So now there are those tools as well for grading papers for teachers, where teachers can. So teachers are like, well, if the kids aren't doing the work, why should we do the work either? Like we can. So it's just it's a constant.
Yeah. And so I said to him, I said, yeah, the best thing to do is like all the work is done in class. Everything's done in the room. The only thing they do at home is read. Like they have to, they have to read certain material, but they're not going to answer questions because they're not going to write the answers. They're just going to, everything's online. It's all available. Like, what are we doing here? So yeah, so I get it. So let's start me off here from your perspective as a guy who writes, right? You're putting words to paper on a consistent basis. You've been doing it for years. Very successfully so. So when you look at the landscape of AI, specifically in the space where you operate in the nonprofit world, like what are you seeing? What are you doing? We could talk about those two things separately. What are you hearing from people that you talk to about this stuff in that space? Dive in.
Yeah, sure. So I think most people in my space are receptive to this. I do speak to people that are still saying I can do it better than ChatGPT, and they're not necessarily wrong. Meaning, like if I tell ChatGPT to write the best direct mail letter in the history of direct mail letters, with all of the best practices involved, and just based on that prompt, I can do a better job. I can right now. I don't think that's going to last very long, but right now, in terms of I'm going to like my version more than I'm going to like ChatGPT's in a significant way. I'm not talking about specific word choices and whatnot. I'm talking about the overall structure, the things that like I care deeply about as a best practice. I am going to make sure that every single line is infused with that love and energy and you language and everything that I believe to be true. Whereas ChatGPT will focus on it as a rule, and then it'll break it, or it won't be as strict about it, or it won't be as comprehensively strict about it. So I think there is something to be said for the fact that this technology isn't quite there yet. However, I think it's very safe to say that it's going to be there soon. And certainly if you program it and give it the prompts and say, be extremely strict about showing donor love throughout the entirety of this letter, it's going to get there. So to me, that I believe that this tool is extremely valuable in terms of the writing. Where I think people are being smart about it, where people are trying to be smart about it, is to use it and to know that it doesn't provide strategy. And so just as for instance, I'm working with an organization right now on really turning their newsletter for subscribers into donors. And I think that there's certain things that can be done in order to change the language to make better asks in your organizational newsletter. And I think that if you give the right prompts, ChatGPT or any similar tool can be really good about doing that. You don't need me to rewrite your newsletter to be donor-centric. You don't. However, I think in terms of a broader strategy of let's think about how we're going to turn these subscribers into newsletters. What can we offer them? What can we give them? What can we do to bring them into this ecosystem where they're sort of followers, they're sort of passive observers in our ecosystem? What can we do to make them take that active step to actually become donors? I think that's harder. And right now, I think that requires strategy and brainstorming and testing. And again, I think that the AI tools out there can be extremely helpful in developing that. I do this all the time where I have an idea to do something and I throw it into ChatGPT and say, what do you think of this idea? And it'll help me refine it. And I think all of that, but I think the strategy itself is still man-powered right now. And I think it will be for the foreseeable future because ChatGPT, these tools live in a certain context, in a certain vacuum, and they're not able to pull out an idea that you might have had talking to someone else and be able to pull this together and that together. It's living, the scope of what they're writing is still relatively narrow compared to the context that you and I have when approaching a project, because we're able to pull in ideas from absolutely everywhere and read this and read that. And I don't think that the AI tools are quite there yet. So in my mind, the strategy is where we live in terms of, and then we can use the AI to pull it apart and get a little bit more granular as we drill down.
Do you think that you're shifting from being the writer to being an editor?
To a certain extent.
Is that a bad thing?
No, not at all. I don't think it can be a tough pill to swallow. When I remember when I was first introduced to ChatGPT, I was like, okay, I need a new line of work. I'm done. It's over for me, right? I think there is that period of like, but then it's sort of like, okay, challenge accepted, right? Like I now have a new tool.
Makes his way into okay, nice.
I now have a tool that I can use to be better at my job. I don't think that it's going to replace me in my job. I think I'm going to be able to utilize this and I'm going to become a more valuable person to the organizations that I help. And that's really the way that I try and look at it.
Have you come across the naysayers or the person who says what's that conversation like with somebody who refuses, but I've met a couple like that who refuse to dive in to that space?
The line most recently I heard from a writer in the field was, I'm too busy to use ChatGPT, which I didn't even know where to begin in response to it. I just sort of nodded and said, okay.
That's the title of this episode now. Like that just became, right? Like, no, isn't that that could be a podcast. It's on its own, right? I'm too busy to use AI.
It was a crazy statement to me then. It's a crazy statement to me now. I didn't argue with this person. I just sort of left it and said, okay.
Holy moly. I got to stop for a second on that line. I'm just going to breathe for a second here on that line. I'm too busy to use the tool that's going to save me all the time in the world and make me infinitely better, more powerful, and far more successful at what I do. I don't have time for that. Oh my.
I can just...
You refer them to a good psychologist because I feel like...
No, I think that this person may have trouble moving forward because she is an amazing writer and a wordsmith. If I think that I'm a good writer, but I'm not a wordsmith. I don't agonize over every single word. Should we use this verb or that verb? Like I sort of pick the best one and I move forward. And it needs to work and I try and make it the best possible. But she will pull it apart and I think that that's going to be a tough space to live, in my opinion. And I get why she doesn't like the product that it's producing for her, that AI is producing for her, because she wants the perfect word that has all of the connotation that it needs to bring to a certain sentence or whatnot. I think that's going to start to be prioritized a little bit less as we move forward. And I think she's going to find herself in a tough spot.
Like in an hour, she could teach the thing exactly what she wants it to and how she wants to write, just by loading up. Here's 500 pieces I've written over the last time. I want you to stay strict to the rules of this thing and be me, whatever it is, right? Oh my. Okay. Wow. Amazing. Okay. No, that just, I never think we're going to get the name of the episode from within the episode, but sometimes I think about it in advance and sometimes I don't, but this time I don't have time. Okay. Amazing. Yeah. I've run across the naysayer once or twice, and I think, I hate to say it, but like, you're not going to make it. Like, this is going to blow right past you. And then you're going to wonder, well, why does no one want my services anymore? Because it costs 10 cents on the dollar to go over there and use ChatGPT or some version of it. Okay, good. That's a great start. So step back for me for a second. Like, in terms of your reading and what you're seeing, like, let's get maybe a wider landscape of the space. Like, where have you heard or seen different AI tools being employed in the nonprofit space? Obviously, you talked about the writing, but where else?
So I think there's tools that are specific to the nonprofit space and tools that are not specific to the nonprofit space that nonprofits can greatly benefit from. I in preparation for this episode, I wrote down the handful of tools that I like using, that I've seen in the field, and some of them are specific to nonprofits. Most of them are not, right? So ChatGPT is not specific to nonprofit. I think this is, again, I keep sort of interchanging ChatGPT with AI or any of the other writers that are out there, because like that's the one that I use.
Xerox. It became Xerox, yeah.
Yeah, but not for everyone. I mean, I know that there are people out there that Perplexity and Claude, there's a lot out there. I just started with ChatGPT and continued with it, and it now knows my voice, and I've sort of spent the time with it. So that's where I am. And I think that we could have a whole episode just on using this specific tool, or again, one of the similar ones, because it does so much more than write. It really can be a thought partner. It can help pull out different ideas from transcripts or whatever it is. Like there's so many different things that it can do. But so that's certainly an easy one for me to say is number one. The other ones I would say are uh, really filling gaps in my expertise or talent. So, for instance, I work very closely with graphic designers, but I cannot graphic design for anything, right? Like you wouldn't be able to recognize a stick figure if I drew it. It would just like I have no talent when it comes to that. So a lot of the tools that are out there when it comes to graphic design, I gravitate to because it's again so much easier for me to just give it a prompt and for it to produce something,
Fascinating.
and I'm much happier with the imperfect product that it produces than it would be if I tried to get something doing it myself. And the one that I'm referring to specifically that I've been finding myself using a lot is called Gamma, and it does PowerPoint presentations or Google slide deck presentations and web page mockups, and I've just found it to be amazing. I'll give it just a couple of notes on something that I want to talk about. And I say, like, how many slides is this? And in my head, I'm thinking it's like 3 or 4 slides. And it'll pull it apart and be able to produce something for me that's 9 or 10 or more slides, because it's really pulling apart ideas in a very succinct way, a very clear way. It gives me ideas for what the visuals could look like for it. And it's something that, again, is not in my wheelhouse at all. So it just, if I can use it, fantastic. And even if I can't, it jumpstarts the whole process for me, and I'm ecstatic when it does.
Yeah, Gamma's a good one because, and you can also work it with ChatGPT or whatever
Yep.
version. You can tell it, I'm going to do this in ChatGPT, write the prompt for Gamma AI so that this content ends up in a really nice presentation over there. Like you can do that too. And that works really. I just did one in Gamma for plan giving for an organization. They wanted to like lay out a site for their plan giving program. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about plan giving. And then what is that going to look like? So it gave me everything from fonts to colors, right? And it laid it out beautifully. It didn't build the site for me. I didn't need that. I just needed the presentation to understand what they were trying to do. Gamma's a good one. Good. What else?
Well, before we move on, just curious, since it sounds like you have really used it. I've only used the free version of that. Have experience with the paid version of Gamma?
I have not started to give it money yet, but even in the free version, I found that it's given
For
me
sure.
really what I wanted, at least at the beginning. I don't at the moment do so many presentations that I feel like I need to do that. I also have like, I already have a template that I use that I built myself in PowerPoint
You can
that
use.
works for my
Sure.
presentations at the moment. But I imagine that I'll just upload that to Gamma at some point and it'll just do it. So
Yeah, yeah. And I wasn't even just referring to you, because I know a lot of organizations themselves that find themselves using these tools in a real way. I mean, it's often worth the cost for the organizations to invest in these. But I certainly recognize that I think a lot of people are still at this sort of learning stage to say, okay, what tools are out there? How am I going to use this? And is it worth it for the paid versions? Which is just an interesting part of the conversation for me, because one thing that I want to do throughout this conversation is just continue to highlight if there are significant differences between the free and paid versions, because we're dealing with nonprofits, because we're dealing with people where resources aren't abound and you can't just throw money at new tech. I think it's good for people to understand that a lot of these, if not all of these, have free versions that are fantastic, and then to understand what you get when you pay a little bit more to expand those capabilities.
yeah, so let's pick up on that point and we'll put a pin in the other thing for a second, come up on this point. There's definitely a gap between the implementation, and this I read in the literature, between small and larger nonprofits in terms of what they were willing to invest in and spend money on from a tech tool. That's always been true. It's certainly true now. So the bigger organizations that have a little bit of money to spend and also human capital, they have people who potentially can work on some of these things, have an advantage that they're able to implement some of these more expensive tools right now. So they're ahead of the game by a couple of years because eventually those things will come down in price. But for the moment, the big ones, stuff that's inside a CRM, some of the more expensive tools, the wealth search tools that are very expensive but have AI built into them and do all kinds of amazing things, the small nonprofit can't afford those guys. So either there's going to be a solution that allows them to opt into that now, which is some sort of a partnership program, whatever that is, or they're just going to have to wait, or they're going to build it themselves, which I wouldn't put it past the 18-year-old kid who's starting a nonprofit to build his own wealth engine search possibilities. I should ask my son to do that for me on the cheap and figure out how to do that. But I think that's definitely a fact. There's no question that the one that you're talking about, ChatGPT, as an example, there's definitely a difference between the free and the paid version there that I think is significant. And, But I haven't found that in a lot of other ones. I found that at the moment that for most of the work that people in our field are doing, a lot of the free are really sufficient. But I would say this is like the bigger point. These tools are investments. They do definitely save you time, and they do ultimately save you money. And I think they make you more money ultimately. And if that's true, then you have to do the math to see if the $20 a month that it cost me to upgrade to ChatGPT paid, right? And that's not a lot of money over the course of the year. If it gets me the one donation that I need to cover it, it's probably worth it. Or that CRM that's out there that's doing everything, and automating everything, and it's all tied together, and it costs me, a couple of $100 a month, right? But if that's one better donation because I got access to somebody I didn't have before, like, I think that's like a calculus that I see people missing out on. They're not thinking that way. Like you talked about strategy before. This is like overall AI strategy implementation for an organization that first of all, like you have to do it. You have to have an AI strategy. It has to be part of your overall strategy now. But when you then move into the implementation piece of it, I think part of it is you have to be worried about the people on your team and not losing people. I get that for sure. At the same time, you got to be better. You got to be as impactful as possible. And so, like, you have to think about how that's going to be. If you have a person who's resistant, that's a problem. If you have a team that has people on it who are superfluous at this point, some things, once you can AI away a set of tasks, like that person needs another role or they move on. Like it's not personal. That's just the reality. That's always the reality of technology. Horses became something entirely different when they no longer needed to move people across the country on a horse, right? And so like, and to finish that, because they had cars. I don't want to leave that out there for people like, what is he talking about? But I think that's important to appreciate that's, we always evolve, right? And so the tech always improves in different industries, and then suddenly see millions and millions of people not being employed because we, didn't need stagecoaches anymore. So I think that's like a major factor in the strategic part of it. And, the fear piece that you mentioned earlier, if you have a leader of an organization who's afraid or like doesn't want to go in there, like that's also it's a real issue. Like you have to think about it, like there's going to be a nonprofit that's quote unquote competition that's going to just run right past you because they just got smarter than you did because they just have way more information coming in and they're able to synthesize and filter out the stuff that you have no idea even exists because you hadn't thought about it before. You're not willing to even dip your toe into that space and talk about it at all. Like that's lost. So I think that's a major piece of this puzzle. Before you even get to like using the tools and getting into a tech stack that's an AI-based tech stack and automating everything. Sure. So
interesting.
Yeah. Where else are you seeing it? I use like just as an example. You mentioned ChatGPT. You talked about Gamma. So I use an AI for all of my coaching meetings. It's called Read.ai. It's built into my Zoom. It's attached to my Zoom. It has an automation that connects to HubSpot, which is the CRM that I use for the business, right? So every meeting summary and transcript auto flows right into their contact information there. So I have it all there. But it's not just giving me summaries and transcripts. It's it's actually reading the meeting in real time. So it's telling me how I'm doing. It's telling me about the flow of the conversation. It's telling me about the energy that's happening in the meeting while the meeting's going on. And it's not for coaching. It's really a sales tool, but I use it as a coaching tool because I want to learn how to do those meetings better, right? So if I'm in a meeting, sorry, getting ahead of myself. If I'm in a meeting with a bunch of people and I can't monitor everybody at the same time, I don't have the scores on while it's going. That to me is a little weird, but
it'd be distracting.
Yeah. But afterward, I can go back and look at, the quality of the meeting. It scores it, it rates it, tells me my performance, where I can improve. Like that's an amazingly powerful tool that's why I pay for it.
And you find that feedback to be like, you got the feedback and you're like, oh, they're right about that. You find it to be,
because you're looking at a meeting and like, oh, that person didn't talk at all. You didn't notice it right while it was going on. Or one place where I've used it also is where if I do a webinar and there's, a lot of people in the audience, and I can see them, right? They're all on the screen. They're not cameras off, their cameras on. So it takes notes of all the people who are in the meeting, right? So if there's someone in the meeting who is heavily involved in the conversation, like that's somebody I want to know because that's potential business, right? Because they're engaged, they're interested. You don't notice that always in a room. So here it's like, okay, Raimy was like super on point in the conversation around AI and donor analysis. I have a tool for that. Let's start up the conversation with Raimy and his nonprofit about using. So like, there's a lot that goes into that tool that I'm able to extract. If I built more on the back end of the automation side of it, I could do a lot more with it, right? Zoom is trying to catch up with a lot of these things that it effectively missed out on in 2020 during Corona, because they weren't ready for it, but also trying to catch up. So that's one that I use that I pay for. ChatGPT I pay for. I started paying for early on when people thought
I'm curious if we can stay on that for a second. What do you see? Because I've heard different answers to this question, but what do you see as the biggest difference between the free and paid versions for ChatGPT?
You don't have access to all of their different models in the free version. So you're not using the greatest power of its ability. Like today, like in preparation for this, I did a deep search. That's something that just rolled out in the last couple of weeks. It's called the deep search. The bottom of the screen, it's one of the little buttons. It's called deep search, and it does like much heavier research into a subject than you could have done before on there, right? Like I've heard Sam Altman say, for those who don't know, he's the founder and CEO of OpenAI, that he doesn't use Google anymore. That he does all of his internet searches in ChatGPT. And he said, like, when you go back to Google, it feels like a cheap version until they build their own into their model, which I think they're doing anyway, right? But at the moment, it feels like a cheaper version. So I think you're missing out on some of the opportunities that are available by not paying $20 a month. The $200 version a month, I don't know what that is. That I can't see like the gap between $20 a month and $200 a month is massive. And to see, like, I don't know how you evaluate that, but at $20 a month, I mean, like, there's a lot of things I waste money on at $20 a month. This isn't one of them, right? Especially the amount of use that I get out of it in terms of the stuff that I'm doing in ChatGPT for clients, for myself. And I'm much better at every aspect of the work that I do because I have a tool like this, which I would have loved 10 years ago.
Fascinating. Very cool.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, beyond what you talked about in terms of the copywriting piece of it, are you seeing its use in social media? Are you seeing its use in the nonprofit space? Are you seeing its use in the donor space, in the fundraising domain? Like, talk about that from your experience in your work.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely being used. It should be used even more, but it's definitely being used. I mean, there's one of the places where I love to see it is personalization, right? If you can tell it that you want to take a generic letter that you've written or that ChatGPT has written and say, okay, I want to tailor this to Bini. The key talking points are that he loves the Knicks and he goes running. And it'll tailor that message that you've already written, that's already been produced, and it'll tailor it to Bini based on just a couple of talking points. And there's those types of touch points where you can take something that is relatively generic and make it feel relatively personal, go a really long way. And now there's almost like no excuse not to do it anymore because it's just so incredibly easy to do. So I think there's places in fundraising where people should be using it more. I'm definitely seeing it used. But even in terms of social media, you never have to start with a blank sheet of paper anymore. You might be a stickler and it might not produce the best draft of something. That is okay. But you can now say to ChatGPT, I don't know what I want to post on social media about. Here are 5 different activities that have happened in our nonprofit recently. Can you help me come up with a post or a series of posts? And all of a sudden it's going to spit something out to you that's going to spark ideas in your head. This is like the greatest cure for writer's block I've ever seen, could ever imagine. There's no excuse anymore not to be able to write stuff, not to be able to publish stuff, not to be able to generate ideas. So those are places that come top of mind. I've seen it be able to pull. You can send out another really cool application I've seen is when people have annual reports. So they send out these annual reports, but I hate to break this to people that don't know it. No one really reads the annual report. At best, it gets skimmed. They'll open it, they'll skim it, they'll look for their name, but like no one is like reading through every page. It's just not the way these things generally work, except maybe
Okay.
for present company excluded. I don't know.
The nerds among us in this space who find that that's where they find donors. You talked once about where people like who people hang out with. Like I look at like the donor pages to see who organizations raise their money from, not because I care that they raise their money from them. I care that the organizations that I'm doing business with aren't.
You just prove my point in a lot of ways because while those donor lists are extremely interesting and valuable to you, on page 4, they wrote a 4-paragraph description of Project X that's been running for the last 8 years. And I guarantee you that whoever wrote that, first of all, it wasn't one person that wrote that. It was 17 people, written by committee, got torn apart, thrown out. It was probably edited 2 hours before the thing went to print or was finally published. Like someone spent an inordinate amount of time writing those 4 paragraphs about that project that shows up on page 4. And you, Benny, who love annual reports and are super interested in it, breeze past it because the donor lists are on page 19. So people aren't reading those annual reports. However, one thing you can do with AI, with ChatGPT, is you can upload your annual report to it and say, okay, I want to send a personal note to Benny based on this annual report, and I want to flag his attention. I want to tell him that on pages 3, 7, and 9, there are descriptions of projects that I know he's going to be interested in because he's expressed that he really cares about X, Y, or Z. And all of a sudden, it's going to generate like a personalized cover letter for Benny that I, as the executive director, am going to be able to share with you and say, Benny, I'm sending you the annual report. Just wanted to bring your attention to these pages, these topics, because you're going to be super interested in them. And you're going to be able to tell your audience exactly what they should pay attention to. And there's tremendous value in that. And it's all stuff that can be brought out really easily nowadays.
Yeah, I love it. To take it even further into the social media space, like I built a custom GPT a while back that helps to produce the social media content calendar for an organization based on a theme that I'm providing to it. So if I'm taking a campaign story that somebody's doing, whether that's a peer-to-peer campaign or it's a long-term campaign or it's organizational fundraising, whatever it is for the year end, and I can now throw it in there and say, okay, I need, for this story, for this organization, they're running this campaign from X and Y and Z dates. Give me the social media calendar, all the platforms, all the messages, all the additional images that I need, who's the target audience, and when to post. And it gives me the table for the entire thing.
Love it.
And now some people think, well, you're not trying, because you're just throwing in like, well, hold on a second. It took me hours to build the custom GPT. But beyond that, like, you're not just throwing that on there and like hoping it works. You're going to still do the work. I just saved myself a lot of the time in having to create the table and put the top. And now I have it, and now I can replicate it for other organizations. To your point, there's another one that I think I told you about. I built one based on your writing that, because this is not a secret, because all of the campaigns for all the companies are available online, right? So that's Cosmatch, that's charity, that's, Give Butter, that's Classy, all the storylines from all those campaigns. You can find the good ones, right? That resonated, that raised a lot of money, right? You can then pluck them all, throw them into a ChatGPT or a Claude or a DeepSeek or any of these other ones and say, tell me in here what worked, right? Extract the core key principles that made these things work. Amazing. Now, every time I'm going to come here with an organization, I'm going to tell you their basic story. I'm going to ask you to read their website, and I'm going to ask you to write based on the best version of what you just pulled out of that, right? Mm-hmm. So give me the story for their campaign. Amazing. Now that you have that, you can then ask the organization, give me the folder to all of your emails that you sent out to your donors over the last year. Every single one of them. Not because you're interested in the content. All you're interested in is some of the terminology and the voice, right? You want to get the voice of the organization. And now you toss that into that stream. So now you got the story, and now you have all the emails you could ever want to send to every single one of the different target audiences in that organization in one thread that is downloadable, right? And then, move it over into your whatever system you're using for your outreach. And now you've done all of it in a very short period of time. And it's good, right? This is the thing I talk about a lot. Last time we talked about my super action committee, but the other thing I do with all this is I reverse engineer a lot of the time in the different tools that I'm working in. So if something worked and I got the product that I want to know the prompt that's going to get me that every single time and save me the time. So I can build a custom GPT based on that for sure, or an AI agent at some point in the future. But for the moment, like, I want to produce this high quality in this structure, in this style every single time. What do I need to tell you
Wow.
to get that every single time?
Wow.
Because it's quote unquote self-evaluatory, right? It can read itself and review itself, right? So now you did the work, but now you have the prompt that's a killer prompt that you can use over and over and over again to do that. And then you can, as I said, you can build a custom GPT. Building custom GPTs is super easy now. A year ago, it was not as easy to do, but it's much easier to do now. And you can then have all of your little agents that are doing all of your stuff to be able, they don't talk to each other per se, but you can build in that spaces. But now you have the voice. And now anytime you need an additional email. So as a client I was working for earlier in the year, I don't usually do the writing, and they knew everything I was doing, I was producing in ChatGPT. They knew, I told them up front, but I built a thing that was their voice. And so all I needed to do is say, okay, now I need an email for Thanksgiving, just to tweak it a little bit, take the story and give it a little bit of a twist. Okay, now, we're going to only reach out to the doctors in the list, right? So give me a version of this that isn't like wonky and weird, that actually resonates and connects to that audience, right? What the danger, quote unquote, is that as this gets better and better, if you continue to send the generics out, I know it. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, like, not just me, everyone's be like, you're not even trying, right? So get that to me in a way that it resonates with me as a potential donor. And, yes, I'm a little bit of a freak inside the space because I do this professionally, but as donors get smarter about this stuff, they're going to want better content on it. But you can do all this stuff much faster. So I do on the social media side. I use it for emails. I have one on the welcome journey. So I can take a new donor that comes in. Anybody can use it. It's available on ChatGPT. Just look it up. It's called like the epic welcome journey, whatever. Anyway, it's like, so in that one, you just tell it the name of the donor, right? If you're worried that it's going to like suddenly know everything about that person, it's not, because you're not giving away all the information. You just, David Jones. There's 5,000 of them, right? But David Jones donated for the first time to my organization. It asks you basically 5 questions: the name of the donor, in what context did they donate, how did they get to you, how much did they give, right? And what do you want what's the CTA for this email, right? And then it builds the welcome journey. So there's a thank you that goes out first. It's initial, it's really well written. And then it progresses, and you can automate that in your system for every single one of your donors.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And so, like, to me, I know I told you about this. I got ripped for having the thank you custom GPT, the thank you email custom GPT that I built a while back. To me, I looked at the people who were arguing with me and thought, I feel bad for you, because you're the person who people using this tool are going to run right past, because they're just better at this than you are right now. Other than writing with a pen, which I even told you, like when you're talking about your son's bar mitzvah thank you notes, you can also, there's an AI tool for that also, which prints in real ink in your son's handwriting. But like to me, there's, once you start to dive into the tools, and we only talked about 3.
Yeah, handful. Yeah, at most.
We didn't even get into donor analytics, like wealth engine searching that people are doing in terms of being predictive around donors. There's so much that's going on in that, like the organizations. That's where I say, like, yes, it might cost you $5,000, right, to do it, but like, everything about those donors. You suddenly found 100 new high value targets in your list. Like, it's probably worth the investment.
I would think so. Yeah. Wild, wild. My only question for you in response to all of this is like, it sounds complicated. I guess that's not the question, but it's a statement. But it
Is it
sounds
too
complicated.
complicated?
There you go. That's the question I was looking for.
There you go. I would say because we're on the early side of this, right? So effectively, because we do this, you and I professionally, we're early adapters. So we're on the front end of that curve. It's more complex because of just having to have the patience and the sort of the resilience to sort of stay with the tool until you figure it out. Eventually, it gets built right in. And so it becomes much easier to do. So if you're using a social media program now to write, to help you post, so let's say you use Buffer or Publer or one of these other ones that manages your social media calendar, it has an AI option in there, right? And so you can start the post and say, complete this for me. It's built into the processing now. If you're in Word, right, for people who still use Word, but people who still use all the professionals out there who still use, Office in the same way they did in the 1980s, they have built Copilot into it, right? So Copilot is now part of the Office suite. And suddenly, like, you can AI your legal documents. You can AI your, whatever, your investment documents. And it becomes easier. Some of them were harder. Now they're easier. Grammarly was another one that I use. I actually pay for that one too, but I'm not sure I need to, but I do. But like my writing is better because I use a tool that, like checks my grammar, right? And, not crazy. Like I always say to people when I read it, like when I read an article, I read a newspaper, right? And the English is bad. I'm thinking this isn't that hard, right? Grammarly is a really simple tool. It's on, like it underlines for you. Hey man, I think you can write this sentence better. You misspelled that word. You forgot, whatever. Like, I mean, that one. So I think there's a complexity to it when it starts. And yes, so organizations that don't have someone who's willing to dive in to try are going to suffer. I think at the beginning, they'll continue to suffer if they're not willing to adapt to the tools that are all going to have this stuff built in, right? So you're going to find yourself in a space ultimately where, as we didn't even get to this, but I talk about it a lot, the $1 million one person nonprofit, right? I talk about it a lot. I should actually do it, but the Scrap City, here we come, right? Because all the tools are automated and AI built, right? So the only part you're left with is, the actual asks, if you're speaking to a donor directly. And if you're doing a live event, you have to actually perform. But the rest of it is all doable through systems. And what I think ends up happening is that an organization is going to come to it and see the tool. That CEO is going to press play, quote unquote, and then you're like, wow, why aren't we doing this? And everyone's be running for the hills because they should have been doing it for 3 to 5 years already. And that CEO just didn't know. They were too busy for AI. But so I think that there's a complexity to it because the tools are, you have to spend a lot of time in them to figure out how they work. So like it has to be interesting to you. If it's not interesting to you, or the utility has to be there for you. Otherwise, like, you're not gonna stay. Like I said, I talk a lot today, but when I do this, I teach part of a group that teaches a fundraising course for an organization here called Nefesh B'Nefesh. They help a lot of people move to Israel. Great organization. We both benefited from their services. And one of the things they do is they do job training. And so one of the ones that they do is fundraising. They help people who want to be better at fundraising or people who want to get into fundraising. So I teach a one-time lecture each semester on online and digital fundraising. Okay. An area that I spent a lot of time on with you and on my own over the last 5+ years. Okay. So what I say at the end is I say to them, don't learn old school traditional style fundraising. Like we're past that at this point. Like we are way past that. Some of the skills and some of the, like you still need, of course, the ability to ask, obviously, but from a standpoint of how you run an organization, from how you build an organization to how the tools that you use to do that, like just skip to 2025 and start from here. I said in the same way, this is the example I give, in the same way that as countries try to move from third world to first world, they don't do all the things that everyone had to do initially to get there, right? They don't put copper wires down in the ground for, for wired telephones like they used to do, in every other country leading up. They skip it. They go right to mobile. They're all Wi-Fi. You don't have to suffer through AOL, to get to now. Like you could just skip it and say, oh, what was AOL? Ooh, I cannot believe you had to wait for dial-up. Like that was even a thing. But so like skip a lot of the steps. And I said to them, like the advantage you have is that if you're open to learning these tools now, you're ahead of 99% of the people in the field because many of them are not learning at the speed and pace that you can. And then you can walk into all these organizations and say, oh, I can do all the tech for your organization. I can put you into the future. And I think that resonates. And it's going to cost you less, right? So, and make you more money. Because a lot of that comes through like pulling apart the complexity piece. That's more of a coaching. I always say it's a coaching point. People will say it's a sales thing. It's so complex. Like, what about it makes it complex? And then once you start to pull it apart, you realize it's not that it's complex, it's that they just don't want to do it, right? And so complex or complicated, which is a word, you're the wordsmith here, right? I know you said you're not, but between the two of us, I'm the brutish Brooklyn guy, and you're from the Midwest, right? I know the eastern edge of the Midwest, but so complicated is a much tougher word than complex. Complex sounds like, ooh, complex. Complicated is like, oh, it's hard, right? Yeah. But either way you break it down, and I feel like once you break it down, you realize that there's something deeper there that's not about the technology. It's about something else. And okay, like, let's take a step. So to finish out, because I'm on the soapbox a little bit today. I was on a webinar with a gentleman by the name of Tim. I think it's pronounced Lockheed is the way he pronounces his last name. He runs something called the Human Stack, which is basically how to keep the human part in the technology world, right? It's a very sort of like sensitive piece of the puzzle, which is there are still people involved here. So he was on he did a webinar. It was free. Again, I love free and it was about AI in the nonprofit space. So I went on as a novice. I was so curious to see because like what he was going to teach, and he was talking to a group of people who really haven't used any of these tools, and so he wanted to show them sort of how easy it was to start the process. And so his first prompt, he goes, "Okay, everyone, just open up ChatGPT." This is one he used for the sake of the conversation, and he said, "Do the following thing: list 10 challenges facing X. X was whatever your role is in the organization, facing X at Y, the name of the organization, in Z, which is the location, right?" And so the example would be, list 10 challenges facing the fundraiser at the Salvation Army in New York City.
Okay.
And then stop, hit enter and watch. And then it pulls 10 challenges uniquely facing that person in that location. You realize that it probably gets 6 to 7 of the 10 right. Mm-hmm. Immediately you realize that the tool knows way more about the challenges that you're facing than probably you do. Because if you had to say what are the 10 challenges facing you in your city, you might not get 10. But like his point was like this tool, quote unquote, knows what you're doing, what's going on. I was like, oh, okay. And then it's like, he's like, it was such a brutally simple set of exercises. He's like, okay, now pick one of the 10, right? This was the prompt. Pick one of the 10, create a scenario, obstacle, options to meet the challenge, and recommend an action that I can accomplish in 5 minutes, right? That was prompt 2. It was amazing, right? I was like, okay, so I picked one, right? I used one of my clients' organizations, right? It gave me a scenario. It gave me the obstacles. It gave me the options to meet the challenge, and it gave me the 5-minute action step, right? That all took a minute and a half. Only because he talked for a minute, right? But it would have taken 10, and I was like, okay, like now I do this. I do a little bit of AI teaching, but I think if someone who says to you it's complicated, it's complex, probably the best answer is, you know what? Let's do this right now. Let's say 1 minute. What do you do, right? As an organization, right? throw it into chat. Let's do it together. Pull up ChatGPT, even the free version. This is in my organization. This is what we do. This is where we're located. What are the challenges I might be facing?
It makes so much sense. And the other thing that sort of crystallized as you were talking, especially giving those examples about this webinar, is that there's a certain level of, I don't know that I would have ever thought to use this word before, but there's a certain level of creativity that all of this AI affords us, right? Because it's doing the work. It's doing the work. So now we have to decide, how are we going to use it? Even if you're this instructor, you have to think to yourself before this session, when he's first constructing the session, what examples can I give to really break it down so that people can see for themselves how not overwhelming this tool really is. And there's creativity there. I think that to me is where I think we're going to start to see the cream really rise to the top here, is like, who are the creative people that are going to use these tools in a unique way that's going to advance their goals, their missions. It's awesome.
Yeah. When I teach it, the first thing I do with people is I do a recipe, right? Like, we're going to make dinner tonight, and we're going to do Italian, right? So the first thing I ask people to do is, and again, I use ChatGPT, but you could use, again, any of the other ones that are similar. There are differences between them for sure, the models, whatever. But like, okay. And I just say, we're going to do Italian. Ask for the 5 simplest Italian dinner recipes or menus that you can do, right? And then it just throws it out and like, okay, pick one. And then tell it, like, I don't really know how to cook, so give me a step-by-step explanation of how to do this, right? And already, like, I find, and I'm sure this is true, is once people start to start to use the tool a little bit, like, okay, the blank page thing is like a real thing. And I think that it begins to solve for a lot of the issues that people face, is the ability to like really zoom into the specific use case. And then you can always see the lights go on when people are in it, right? They like light up, like, oh wow, okay, like suddenly, like, this is amazing. I remember the first time I used ChatGPT I was at Cosmet still. I think I told you this, or I don't know if I told you this. I told somebody else. There was a campaign I was working on that wanted a fun name for their campaign, right? So I mentioned maybe even in the podcast, and I had no idea. And so I was like, oh, you know what? I'm open to these tools. Let's try. Okay. The name of the institution, it's a school in the Midwest, further Midwest than Pittsburgh, right? And they want a fun name for their one-day fundraiser. Go. And then they asked me like 3 questions, like, the age of the students, is there a specific angle to the school, blah, blah, blah. And it came up with 10. I picked 3 and I said, come up with 10 more based on the 3, right? Then from the 10, that second group of 10, which had sort of revised down, I gave the person who was running the campaign 5 of the 10. I never said where it came from, right? And they were like, wow, these are amazing. And I was like, yeah, they are amazing, because I never could have come up with them on my own. Just not that style of creative, right? Just not me. But
right.
I was like, the second that happened, like, I have like this feeling like I'm touching something that's hot, right? This is going to be good, right? And so the ability to sort of lean into some of this stuff and the tools and create and think bigger and think broader, like the Super Action Committee, which we didn't even talk about, because I think that as in terms of boards and ideation around how you succeed, there's probably a lot to talk about.
Absolutely.
We will talk about that at another time, I think. But
most importantly, out of this whole conversation, my wife and I are hosting a fairly large group of people in about 2 weeks, and my wife has been freaking out about what she's going to serve. So most importantly, what I got out of this is I'm going to use ChatGPT. I'm going to suggest a menu to her. She's going to be blown away, because I do not know my way around the kitchen. So the fact that I'm not going to tell her where I got it from, but I'm just going to do this exercise. She hasn't listened to the podcast anyway. She's never going to know. So it's going to be fantastic. She's going to be like, this is unbelievable. I'm going to get some props. It's going to be good.
Also, she's going to have to, if she does, she'd have to wait through 74 minutes of this to get to you mentioning it. So, but I have used it. I have used it for recipes. I have asked it to create for me. I do cook. So, I've had it do like marinades that come up with creative marinades that have a certain blend of spice and taste. I haven't done it for menus, but okay. Like, I have asked it for all kinds of things. Like, I I use it every day. That's why the value is there for me each and every day. And it's increasingly more valuable with each day for the price tag that it has attached to it at the moment. Specifically that one, though the few that I spend money on, I don't have a large stack at the moment. But as I build up the business and I think about some of these other things, there are more tools that I think are probably worth spending money on because they just fit and they ultimately pay for themselves in terms of the growth opportunity in the business. I would say to you this, all we covered today were copywriting, a little bit of social media, a little bit of fundraising in terms of the use of these tools. We talked about the wider landscape of it and its impact on the fears that come into it. There's and I know that we barely scratched the surface on the subject, let alone the actual work of it. But there's a lot more to talk about in the subject in the space of AI and nonprofits. And as I said, when we talk about in trends, it's like AI or die at this point. I really feel deeply that in the nonprofit world, many of these jobs that people hold are going to morph dramatically and some disappear because of the tools that are coming. And we need to be adaptable to that if we want to stay in it. Besides talking about just when it gets generative and it starts to solve some of these problems outright, get that? Just in terms of the work that the people that we know do, it's ride or die at this point, I think.
Yep, or to disagree.
Okay, that is AI nonprofits, I would say part one, because we'll come back to it. We'll bring some people on. We'll talk about it more. And as I should have done this at the beginning, but I'm going to do this. If you got to 76 minutes into the podcast, I'm going to get you that t-shirt that says, "How bad boards kill good orgs." But as always, share your comments and your ideas and your thoughts with us anywhere. Like and subscribe the podcast itself and stay with us because there's more coming.
All right.
Take care, Raimy. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.